Hey everyone, I'm Chris Lesniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the Debate Math Podcast.
welcome everyone to the season 4 finale.
Woohoo! As we've done in the past, we wanted to end the year by bringing together a few of our guests from past debates this season for a roundtable to reflect on past debates and engage in a discussion around a central question.
And with all the stress put on teachers and all the content we have to teach, not to mention the greater political environment we're currently in, we want to hear from our past guests and discuss how do we properly support math teachers.
Well, let's get into introductions first. So, our first guest is returning from our first debate of this season, debate number 36, where we reconsidered grade bands for certification. We have a math specialist and national board certified teacher with a doctorate in math ed who worked as an instructional coach for K-5 math and literacy and a PD coordinator for math and science. She served as the president of OCTM, has published in various journals, presented at multiple state and national conferences, and just began her term as NCTM board member. She strives to lift the voices of all learners by providing experiences that will engage and empower them. It's Dr. Jody Bailey. Hi, Jody.
Hey, thank you again for having me, and congratulations, Chris and Rob, on 4 seasons.
Woo.
That's incredible.
Thanks.
Uh,
Can you tell us or remind us where you are and what your current role is?
yes, I am a math specialist working with middle school students in Hilliard City Schools, which is just outside of Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, and then when you were on with us, you were in a debate where you were arguing for narrower grade bands or sorry, wider grade bands for certification against the narrow grade bands. How has your thinking grown or changed, or has it since then?
I don't think that my thinking has really changed significantly. I've been reflecting on that conversation that we had, and I continue to wonder how we could use a conversation about restructuring grade bands as an opportunity to refocus what teachers across all content areas need. For example, an understanding of how to create engaging experiences for students, support discourse routines, manage student behaviors, and use assessment in ways that provide meaningful feedback for teachers, students, and their families. So rather than specializing in one or two content areas for grades K-8, a broader licensure band offers a chance for pre-service teachers to create interdisciplinary lessons that build on a variety of skills and draw connections across various content areas. Thank you.
Next up, coming from debate 37, a debate about algorithms is someone that we know as the Lady Gaga of math ed. She's a founder and director of the Math Guru, a super cool boutique math and science tutoring studio in Toronto, snowy Toronto at this moment. She's also the host of the Math Therapy podcast, author of the best-selling book Math Therapy, a lead singer and keytarist for my favorite rock band, Goodnight Sunrise. She appears regularly on national television and news outlets as an expert in math education and math positivity. And one of her hashtag goals is to totally change math culture so that STEM is finally as cool as every single Taylor Swift song ever written. It's Vanessa Vicaria. Hey, Vanessa.
Hey.
Can you remind everybody where you are, what your current role is?
Yeah, you just did remind everybody that I'm in a snowstorm in Toronto. So I'm here in snowy Toronto, and I am a math therapist.
Coming off of a 40-day tour of the America. Now, you were on a debate. You argued against dumping algorithms. How has
Mm.
your thinking grown or changed? And also, something kind of cool happened between you and the person you debated.
Yes. Okay. So I would say my thinking has grown and changed significantly, but for unexpected reasons. So, after our debate, our very juicy, heated, spicy debate, I actually had Pam Harris, my opponent, on my own podcast. And I think two things happened. I think the first thing is, I reflected a lot on that conversation as well. And while I think one of the major themes of that conversation was that it wasn't just about the idea of dumping the algorithm. It was the idea for me of black and white thinking, of saying there's only one way we should be teaching math. And I think I've doubled down on that even more actually since our talk. And I've been reflecting on teachers I've had that actually use the algorithm as a teaching tool and what they did that ensued in meaning making, even though they were using the algorithm. So it's kind of helped me think like we don't all have to be doing things the same way, but there are certain practices that make different methodology effective and not. But the major thing that happened is I had Pam on my podcast, and we discovered that so much of our initial debate had been around not defining a lot of the language we were using when we were debating. And it was really, really cool because obviously we were in a debate on your podcast, and then I had her on my podcast where I could just grill her with questions and for an hour. And in doing that, we realized that we have so much in common and we see so many things the same way. And while we might disagree on some things, there are so many things that we do agree on, and I just think that's the cool thing about the math ed community is that when we really talk to each other and define what it is we're talking about and make sure we're talking about the same things, we see all these nuances that we can't just see in a quick soundbite or in a quick like we should never be doing this. And that's what makes us so much stronger as a community of teachers, and it makes us stronger for our learners.
Now, welcome back, Vanessa.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and next up from debate number 39, we have an instructional leader celebrating 16 years in math education. She's worked at every instructional level: classroom teacher, interventionist, instructional coach, and district leader, driving systemic change in how we approach math education. Her mission: ensuring teachers are supported and students actually get math. A K-12 dive rising leader and a South by Southwest EDU panelist, she's a strong advocate that student achievement begins with teacher efficacy. It's Phoenicia Hawkins. Hi, Phoenicia.
Okay, hey everybody.
Good to have you back. Can you remind us where you are, what your current role is?
Yes, I am in Houston, Texas. So I will not complain about any of the weather. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It's not that cold here. It's like 50 or 60, but it's not, not anywhere near where you guys are. But again, in Houston, and I am a director for Instructional Excellence Secondary Math. And I also recently launched my own blog where I just talk about math ed efficacy as much as I possibly can. So that's where I am right now.
Very good. And now you were on a debate talking about fidelity with the curriculum. You argued for some level of fidelity. How has your thinking grown, changed since then?
It hasn't really. I think being in HQIM implementation for year 4 or 5 now, I'm still seeing the same trends. I'm still seeing the same things in classrooms with math teachers, specifically some of our new teachers that are coming in. But I'm also seeing sometimes the hesitancy that we still see with seasoned teachers that have been in the classroom and teaching for a number of years. I still think that curriculum is the tool, but our efficacy and our belief in how we feel about the math is what activates it. And that's where the fidelity comes in. I think it's very specific to each person and it looks a specific way, although districts mandate what they mandate. I think it's up to math leaders to be able to help our teachers understand how they can still have a voice in a curriculum that's written for them, maybe even possibly scripted, but they're still able to have their personality and have their thinking and their interpretation of the math come through. So nothing's changed much, just more experience in implementing HQIM.
Next, we have one of our summer hot seats, hot seat number 7. We have a passionate math educator with extensive experience in secondary math education, curriculum development, and educational leadership. He was an instructional coach and chaired the math department at Wilson School District. His commitment to sharing best practices extends beyond the classroom. He's a frequent presenter at national conferences, including ISTE, PCTM, P&C, the Global Math Department, and NCTM, where he's inspired and collaborated with educators from across the country. It's Daniel Kaufman. Hey, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. Yeah. And now as I'm looking at myself, I'm happy that our soccer season's finally over because I get to shave my mustache. We had a pretty good winning streak going, so I was holding on to it. I figured the mustache was doing it. But anyway, yeah, glad to be back. And so this is now my second year. I'm back in the classroom at the Wyomissing Area School District, teaching 7th and 8th grade. And yeah, things are going well. Just just iron out some things with behaviors and things like that. But glad to be back in the classroom after spending 10 years as an instructional coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always cool to go back and see if what you've learned you're able to put into practice.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah. You were on a debate where you argued for changing how we sequence math learning. Has your thinking grown or changed at all?
Yeah. So like in a nutshell, that talk was more about being okay with kids not getting it because you've been intentional about the way you plan things. And for example, in Algebra 1, if kids aren't understanding maybe graphing in standard form, it's not a big deal. And I'm not putting them in that hamster wheel of remediation because I know it's going to come up again when we do systems of equations. And I know it's going to come up again when we do systems of inequalities, and just being okay with not being there right yet. And so, like, in reflection, quarters come every 45 days, and where I'm at, our grades are locked in. Um, and so, although I have this grandiose plan, wondering, like, do parents know my plan? Does admin, is everyone on board with my plan? Is sometimes, I get those emails, hey, my child so and so has this grade, what can they do? And it's sometimes I'm like, nothing, do nothing. I'm on it. I know that's not what they want it to be, but that's not always what they want. And so just finding that balance of providing enough information and confidence in that we have a plan moving forward. So
That's interesting. Just do nothing. I got this. Like I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that sentiment.
Just
Love it so much.
if you want, have your kids stay after school. That's it. That's all I need you to do. Yep.
Well, we're glad you're back here.
Okay, and last but not least, from our most recent debate, number 46, we have a math educator who has worked with students and teachers in both upper elementary and middle grades. She's the founder of Mix and Math and is passionate about helping teachers grow their understanding of the math concepts they teach. She believes in the power of experiencing math through hands-on work and uses her platform to create joy in math education for teachers and students. She's also incredibly competitive. Whether it's adult sport leagues, paper airplane competitions at the team retreat, or minute to win it challenges with students, it's Brittany Heggie. Welcome back, Brittany.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Remind us once again where you are and what your current role is.
Yes, so I am in North Carolina. I currently do professional development, mostly online, full-time through Mix and Math, but I also am in schools multiple days a week, supporting upper elementary math teachers and coaching them.
Awesome. And so, in our most recent debate, you argued that we should stop teaching analog clocks. How has your thinking shifted or changed at all since then?
Yeah, so I don't know that my argument was that we shouldn't teach it, but that we should really consider the things that we are teaching now and if it is truly like a life skill for students like down the road, which is super interesting because a lot of this conversation, we brought up money, and I was in the store the other day, and maybe I'm late to the game, but I found out that they're no longer making pennies. And so it's like things in the classroom and what we teach are going to have to change. But I will say my opponent, she argued about, okay, if we're not teaching clocks, like we need to have another model, to represent time and make it concrete. And so I have been on the hunt ever since the debate, looking for another model. And I was actually in a classroom where this teacher had this beautiful timer on her whiteboard where she like turned the timer, and it wasn't a clock, but it was a circular number line. And as the timer kind of like counted back, the shading in the clock became less. So my thinking has more so been, I've been looking for other models to replace, the analog clock and, support this idea of like building students' understanding of time, even when the analog clock is not as present in their lives.
Wonderful. Thank you. And with that, let's get into the debate. All right, we begin with opening statements from all of our speakers. You each have a minute or two to present your initial arguments.
We want to hear your thoughts on how we can properly support math teachers. Jody, you are up first, and your time begins now.
I think that we need to really encourage lifelong learning when teachers leave their pre-service teaching program. We should not assume that they are ready to fly without some support. I think continuing job embedded professional development, like in coaching in the classroom alongside teachers, is essential, especially in those early year teachers, but also for more experienced teachers. I also think we need to consider how needs of early career teachers have changed since they did all of their college prep and student teaching either during the pandemic or as we were coming out of that. So their experiences as pre-service and early career teachers are very different than any of us had. So how might their needs have changed? So that's my argument. We need to continue to consider and grow together.
Okay, and now we'll hear from Vanessa. The floor is yours.
First of all, I love everything that Jody said, and I just want to say yes to all of that. And I think my focus really, when I think about supporting our teachers, is twofold because, like Jody mentioned, we have pre-service teachers and then we have teachers who have been in the profession for a long time. And both of those groups, we know that one of the major hindrances for most teachers at this point, especially if they're elementary, is their own math trauma and baggage that they bring to the classroom. And there's absolutely nothing in place for them to deal with that. So, I think number one, I would love to see that addressed in pre-service programs, like actually having these teachers who didn't intend to come in teaching math, who are going to be teaching math to our youngest, most vulnerable students who are forming their ideas of what math is. They need to have some support. There needs to be some mental training. There needs to be some unpacking. They have to have a way to actually unpack the math trauma that happened to them so that it doesn't affect their teaching in the classroom. We want them to be taking on all these amazing new teaching strategies and instructional practices. And how can they do that when they're so scared of making a mistake or of replaying the harm that happened to them? And for the teachers that are already in the profession, they've been carrying this baggage for way longer. So I think that to me would be the number one thing is I think at this point we realize that we have not seen our students as people with emotional needs for so long. We just teach them content and we're seeing that they need that assistance. And we need to look at our teachers the same way. They're human beings in front of a classroom teaching content through their own emotional lens. And unless we create that safety for them and help them build a better relationship with math, they're never going to be able to do that for their students.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next up, we will hear from Phoenicia. Phoenicia, your time begins now.
Yes, so connecting completely with Jody and Vanessa, absolutely, like just speaking to my whole entire heart. I'll even extend that and say I feel that the way we feel about the math is also a huge component in supporting teachers. I feel like teachers are not being told enough that they're great in what they are. I think they get told a lot of what they're not doing. Um, Having been in leadership for a couple of years, one of the things that I make sure I'm not coming into a room with a clipboard. I'm not coming into a room to always evaluate. I tell some of the APs that I mentor, there's a difference between Phoenicia and Miss Hawkins. Phoenicia's going to come in the room. She's going to pull a small group with you. If I have to real-time coach, I'm sliding you a note. I'm not interrupting your message to, not demean is not the right word, but to tear down, any confidence that may be there or whatever little confidence might just be holding on by a thread that day. And so I feel like, being in schools every day, that's just the message that we're giving teachers that they're not doing it right. And sometimes it's okay to just walk in the classroom and thank the teacher for showing up that day and thank them for being there. Because as leaders, we get to go to our office and do all the things, and we may not be in the room with 180 kids spread throughout the day. And so it's just restoring the belief that teachers can, and making sure that they understand that, it's not about the data all the time. It's about feeding the human that's in front of kids all day long. And so for me, I think supporting teachers just comes to humanizing the connection with them and making sure that they understand that they can and that they have a belief about themselves and about the math. Because as Vanessa has said so many times before, it pours out. How we feel about the math really comes out. And are we doing more harm than good? So that is how I'm feeling about teacher support right now. There's a difference between compliance and support. And too many times we think that compliance is support, and it's absolutely not. And it's what's tearing our teachers down.
Well said. Okay, and next up is Dan. The floor is yours.
All right. So I'm going to take this from like what I would benefit, I think, from with support, and I'll go big picture to small picture. So big picture, give me something to work with. I want to focus on how I'm teaching and not what I'm teaching. And I'm not saying give me a scripted curriculum, but give me something so that I can focus on my teacher moves and not I have to go home and build a lesson. No, I have to build 3 of them because I have 3 different preps. And then I've got to worry about how do I teach it, or do I even worry about how I teach, or do I just get the content out there, right? So give me something to work with. Give me some kind of program, something to at least start with. personally, and like by no means am I like the Lorax here, but I do my best thinking in the summer. When it comes to the school year, I am on like an autopilot. I can do little things here and there, but if you want me to think deeply about any of my instruction and how I teach, it has to happen in the summer. So pay me a respectable hourly rate, and I will do great work. And I will, I'll put together some good stuff so that during the school year, again, I can focus on the implementation of that work, not, hey, let's build this ship as we're flying it. And then the third piece, which I had a student teacher last year, and it was awesome because I would teach a lesson, and I had a planning period right after that, and we would just both go through the lesson again and just talk through the, oh, how I asked that question probably could have been better if I asked it this way. And it was just a really good discussion. And right now we have a PLC that runs every other day with I have 4 other math teachers in that group, and we'll do that occasionally. And it's always just a good discussion. It costs $0, and I see a lot of growth just talking through my lesson. Again, I'm not talking about how did I build the lesson. I'm talking about the teacher moves I used during the lesson.
Wow, thanks, Dan. And finally, Brittany. Brittany, floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is a really hard question because there is so much that we can do to support teachers. And I think a lot of it is dependent on our role, right? If you are in a role to impact policy around math education, like what you are doing is going to look different than if you are in a position that's designing curriculum, or if you're an administrator, or you're a coach, or you're another teacher. And so I think that not every math teacher necessarily has the same needs or areas of growth. And on the flip side of that, I think all of us who are in a position to support math teachers, not all of us have the same strengths and the same passions. Like Vanessa's answer to me is exactly what I would expect from her, because like that is her passion, that is her strength, that is her area of expertise. And so I really think supporting math teachers is actually a collaborative effort where all of us who are in a position to support math teachers, math education, like we all have this same vision. We're all driving the bus in the same direction, but we're all like contributing something different to this space. And so I know for me, like my small part in what I do to support math teachers is like, I just truly believe that we need inspired math teachers. Like when I walk into the classroom, I can tell the difference between a teacher who is inspired and in love with the math that they're teaching and a teacher who is uncomfortable or bored or doesn't understand it or just dreads the math that they're teaching. And I think that that just plays such a huge impact in student learning. And so for me, I think that we can support math teachers by getting them excited about the content that they're teaching, building their knowledge, building their confidence, and just building that passion, because I believe that passion is contagious. And when we pour into teachers' passion around the content that they're teaching, it impacts their students. And I also think it impacts their fulfillment in their role as a teacher. And I say all of that knowing that like there are probably also teachers who are like, that's not what I need right now. But there are also a huge segment of teachers where that's exactly what they need. And so I just think it's a collaborative effort, and we are all going to fit into this puzzle a little bit differently when it comes to supporting math teachers.
Wow. I was taking so many notes because so many things, because I wanted to make sure that we were able to kind of touch on as much of what all of you said, that brilliance that you all said, in these first few minutes, to start. So I want to go clear back to the beginning with Jody, and everybody, I want to hear, from anybody who wants to discuss this, but uh, we've been talking about like pre-service teachers and going from pre-service teachers going into like the early years, like the first 3 years of teaching, right? So like the question that I have is like, how should that change to kind of set a better foundation for supporting teachers? And Jody, you could start there, and then we'll go to Dan. I saw Dan come off that, but start with you, Jody, and then we'll go to Dan right after that.
All right, thanks, Rob. So I have taught math methods courses for pre-service teachers, and I always feel like in a 15-week course, I spend the first 5 weeks kind of dealing with a lot of the math trauma that Vanessa has mentioned. And I tell them that in 15 weeks, I cannot teach you everything you need to learn. And your reality is you're going to come out of school and you're going to have a job where you might be handed a curriculum that's scripted that you have to follow word for word. You might go to a district where there is no curriculum and you have to design everything yourself. The reality is you're going to wind up somewhere in between either of those extremes, but you still need to, I guess what I encourage them to do is, where do you find good resources? Where do you find good support? I know for myself, I never expected to wind up in the math world. I was all about literacy when I came out of school. Um, Something that was huge for me is something you mentioned, Daniel, is I was part of some different programs that were 2 weeks in the summer. And so we would learn, there would be a professor paired with a teacher, like presenting to us for 2 weeks. And then we would go and we would try those lessons in our classes and meet during the school year occasionally. So it actually started off, I signed up for it as a literacy person, but then there were also math programs, and that was huge in helping me develop as a teacher.
So I guess I was kind of like a new teacher last year with being in a brand new building, teaching grades that seventh grade I wasn't familiar with. But if you're in a building for a long time, there's things you just take for granted, like Spirit Week. I have no idea how Spirit Week works. I have no idea how homeroom works. How do grades work? And there is just so many little things that happen that I think if you've been in the system in the building for long enough, it's just what you do. And as a teacher in the building for the first time, there are so many little things that I had to ask questions about. I had to learn. I had to pretend like I knew what I was doing, screw up and be told that that's not how you do it, and I would redo it. So that being said, thinking about a new teacher, I remember my first job, I had 3 planning periods. I had three classes I had to prep for, and I was coaching soccer and getting my master's degree. And the last thing on my list was what I was teaching, actually. Like I would write a lesson plan in 5 minutes before I taught it because it was just a handful of problems. We'd go over homework, do some problems, skip the word problems, and then start the homework, right? And in hindsight, like I I feel like, and I said this in my opening, the teacher moves are the glue that holds a lesson together. And the less designing of lessons that we can get from new teachers and the more of how do I teach this, it will serve them better in the long run. Designing a cohesive 180-day course is not something for a 22-year-old coming out of college. That is a lot of work. For me to write one lesson probably takes about 2 to 3 hours. I can't do that for every lesson, and to expect that from somebody right out of college is just unreasonable. Or there's something else falls off the plate. And so I would say either pair them with somebody that can really support them, give them the fewest number of planning, like prep periods that they could possibly need, or give them something to work with and then support them with the teacher moves because that's what holds everything together and they can build off of that.
So it's interesting because like I taught like as an adjunct math methods course, and the first time that the students, those pre-service teachers saw how to teach math was the semester before they started student teaching with me, which is mind blowing, right? And you think about like they wanted to be middle school teachers, but they were taking Calc 3. And how important is that? I think that's a debate for another day. But then I think about like, okay, they all of that happens, right? And they're pre-service teachers that haven't really been taught how to actually teach. And then we push them in and they're in their first 3 years. So Vanessa, that brings me to you. Like, how can we help them? Because they're going to have a certain level of anxiety and, around just like teaching and maybe teaching math, maybe having some imposter syndrome. Like, how can we help support these teachers in the first 3 years emotionally?
Well, I feel like it's interesting because there's so much like it's almost like the whole like mistakes equals growth, like we're failing forward, like la la la. Like, I mean, I love all of that, but it seems like it's so student facing. Like we, the teachers, are supposed to be saying that to our students, but there's been very little work done on like the fact that we all came up in a system that did not think that. So like number one, we're supposed to be modeling this for our students and feeling so good about it and helping them feel that way. But the teachers still have the mindset because they've literally been raised to learn the mindset that they are supposed to be the expert in the room and their students should make mistakes and that's cool, but they shouldn't make mistakes, you know? And like, I think we have to also remember like, sometimes words come into the lexicon and it seems like they've been there forever and we sort of forget, like growth mindset or anxiety or even ADHD. Like we just throw them around and forget. This kind of goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning, that we haven't really defined our terms for a very, very long time, you know? So, like, I feel part of it is the word anxiety is actually quite new to our, it feels like it's been there forever because we say it so much, but certainly when I was growing up and until probably a decade ago, we were not running around talking about anxiety at the way we are now, as though it's the most common thing. So you have to remember, these adults in the room grew up feeling this thing and never having permission to talk about how they felt very uncomfortable with it or about how it was weird. They didn't want, they hid it. Like there's so much like baggage and struggle with that. They need to have their own moment, right? So, like, how do we support them with that? I think the first thing is the acknowledgement that most, I'm going to say most because it's documented that well over like 70% of adults feel that way, let alone like the elementary teachers. You know, it's like it's over half of them. So, it's some acknowledgement that we're all going through this. You know, like I do these sessions all the time about math trauma, and I'll always start by being like, how many of you teachers have math anxiety? And like, some of them will look around and they'll slowly put their hands up and they're scared, nervous to say. And it's like, and we have a very safe, you know, I'm not going to use the word safe and throw it around. We have a very nice, friendly community, you know, and still we're not feeling like we're allowed to acknowledge our own baggage around math. So I think we have to, first of all, state that out in the open. In pre-service programs, this should be a course. It should be a course of like, every single pre-service program should have this of like understanding math trauma and math anxiety and how it affects not only the student but the teacher. And then I think this almost goes to, I really like what Brittany said about like, you know, it depends at what level you are, how you can support a teacher. And I think about it this way too, because I even think like, you know, leaders and admin, how are they creating a culture in their school where they're putting their money where their mouth is? And if teachers are really supposed to try new instructional methods and try new teacher moves, like Daniel said, and try, you know, all of this stuff, if they're going to do that, how is the tone being set in their school that it is safe for them to do that, that they're not going to lose their jobs, that they're not going to get a big red X, like Phoenicia said, someone's not going to walk in with a clipboard and be like, like that someone's not going to still be like, that's cool that you tried that, but at the end, I'm looking at your scores. Like, I just don't think we have the framework because leaders and admin, you know, will maybe sometimes say, yeah, of course we believe that. But at the end of the day, they have no concept of like, if you have a teacher who's anxious around math, or if you have any teacher really who's trying a new pedagogical approach or instructional strategy, the payoff of that will not necessarily be seen at the end of that school year. In fact, grades might go down until the whole like everything comes together and melts together. You know, it's like a you don't you're planting seeds and you don't know when they're gonna bloom. So okay, I'm just gonna stop now. Now I realize I'm on a real tangent. The point is, I feel like we all need to bring it together, realize like what this really means, that there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done on the part of our teachers, and that we, every single facet of our educational culture has to be in support of that overall goal. Because in the end, Phoenicia said this when she was talking, no matter what, like your attitude towards math translates to your teaching. So in the end, if we can heal that, that will have the biggest payoff, but it takes time.
Yeah, I want to bring in Brittany and Phoenicia here. Your thoughts about supporting these pre-service teachers and first-year teachers, and I know you both talked something about confidence and building up teacher efficacy in your opening statement. So maybe Phoenicia, you want to start, and then we'll go to Brittany.
Yeah, I mean, it takes me back to when I started teaching. So, seventh grade math in 2010. I interviewed for a science job because, you know, that was what I was great at in high school, and I wanted to be a pediatric neurologist. Clearly, it didn't work out that way. So I'm thinking science is my thing. And then my principal's like, hey, we need you to teach math. So the anxiety that, you know, Vanessa talks about started to boil up in me. And I'm like, okay, I can do it. You know, STEM, math and science, cool. I started taking the test, the state test. I started doing everything that I thought that I needed to do. And then when I got in my classroom, I started teaching my kids the same way my seventh grade teacher who caused my anxiety to teach. We were going to open up the book. You were going to do all the odd questions. I'm going to stand at the board and I'm going to write the example on the board. You're going to copy. Don't ask me why, because I might not know why myself. Just do exactly as I tell you, and we'll get through this in 45 minutes and we'll be great. Um, and it was my I mean, they say you can't say pre-AP now because it's copyrighted, but it was my high performing students that challenged me the most, and they kept asking me, "Well, why are we doing this? Why do we have to do this?" And it really made me reflect on me as a teacher. And so I was very blessed to have an instructional coach who would sit me down and we would walk through the why behind the math. And from there, then I got to think about, okay, well, what if students are coming in with these deficits? What if they can't multiply and we're doing percent proportions and I need them to know how to multiply, but they can't? And so from there, she took me into showing me multiple strategies that the kids could use if they couldn't do, the standard algorithm of 23 times 19. How can we decompose the math and model it in a different way? And so it just began my brain about how our leaders support us. And I was, like I said, I write about this in my blog. I was very blessed to have a very supportive staff of administrators. And so going back to what Vanessa said, it's about admin and about people in our position. When we have teachers who we are charged with supporting, you have to become the content math expert because your teacher is going to need something from you that maybe they're not getting themselves or getting from that textbook. You're going to need to be the counselor. You're going to need to be able to walk in the room. And if you see them struggling with a small group, pull a small group with them, help them, be that support that's not always separate like I said, I go in classrooms and sometimes I'm Phoenicia and sometimes I'm Miss Hawkins. More time than not, I'm Phoenicia because I'm recognizing that our teachers are not getting the support that they truly need. I'm gonna say this, y'all, Chris and Rob take it as a debate, but I have this theory and I don't know about it. Y'all let me know how y'all feel about it. But I have this theory about leadership and how long you were in the classroom versus how long you've been in leadership. And I always wonder, say, for example, if you were in the classroom for 2 or 3 years and then you went into assistant principal roles or anything like that, um, did you get everything you needed to learn about the way instruction should flow, which will go back to teacher support, because then it becomes compliance, not support. Different thing for a different day, but I think it really speaks to teacher support. But as a new teacher, I think it's just getting, for me as a leader, making sure I'm getting down and dirty with with the teachers that I support, showing them different methods. Real quick, this week I had a teacher, she was teaching social studies last year. She never taught math. She was teaching social studies. They moved her over to seventh grade math of all grade levels in middle school. And the curriculum has horizontal number lines for two-step equations. She began to panic, but she said, wait a minute, and she inverted it and she saw the double number line vertically. And she was like, can I do it this way? And I'm like, show me, because I want to see what you're thinking. Came out beautifully, went into her classroom, saw the lesson, and the kids got it. But they got it because she changed how she thought about it. And I feel like we've been talking about, if I was the administrator that said, no, you have to do it this way, how many kids would have failed? How would she have failed that day? Not failed grades, but just her confidence and her being able to apply that math. And when she was getting ready to let the kids go, she said, now y'all do it whichever way you want to do it. If the vertical works for you, great. If it's horizontal, great. If you just want to do the standard algorithm and do the steps. She showed them all three, but I loved it. And it literally almost brought tears to my eyes because I'm thinking, here's a brand new teacher who's new to math, who was able to get the support to make her feel confident in the lesson that she was teaching. And that really translated down to the kids. So to answer the question, I think as leaders, we have to really understand where our pre-service teachers are, where our brand new teachers are. And just like we say, we meet the kids, we have to meet them there too. But I think we also have to be fully equipped to be able to handle that. And a lot of times that means um, getting down and dirty and going to watch a video and looking at how seeing how he teaches and getting on YouTube and teaching yourself so that way you can, bring up the next level of great math educators behind you who aren't scared to make a mistake.
Nice. And Brittany?
Yeah, so it's interesting because my first year teaching, I was a fifth grade math teacher, and I have an elementary ed degree, a master's in elementary math education, but that was not until later. But I knew I only wanted to teach math, not even because I was like always great at math and loved math. It was because that was the only thing that even like remotely interested me. Like I just wanted to like care for kids. I didn't actually care about like teaching education, like the actual education side of things. I was like, I just want to love on kids. And so I was like, I was fine in math, did that. I did not realize until I started teaching math that I didn't understand math. Like, it, I knew how to get the answer, but I didn't actually understand it deeply enough to teach. And so that year, I did so much work. Like, in order for me to be confident in front of students, like, I had to relearn math. Like, that was the support that I needed. And it's a long story, but we were in a brand new school. It was like first year, we were understaffed, like, there wasn't anybody to support me. And so I learned a ton from like NCTM journal articles and John Vandewall. And so for me, when I think about like how do we support teachers, and to be honest, especially after going through and having my elementary math degree for my master's, that was probably a 2-year program or 3-year program, and it was K6. Like, I, even with that, I still had more to learn after that. So I don't think the answer is that teachers, pre-service teachers, can learn everything they need to know about teaching math in college. Like, a lot of that comes from experience, and it comes from the people who are there to support them. And so I think something that we can do to support those teachers is to have resources available for them. Whether it is like, okay, you have a teacher who's struggling to teach this thing, like, you have a text to point them to, or a video, or some type of resource as a school to support them in the moment when they need it. And also have the relationship with those teachers where they feel comfortable coming to you when they don't understand something. And I actually think that should have been the first thing that I said, because it's really hard to support a teacher in helping them understand the math that they're teaching if they don't even feel comfortable telling you, like, hey, I need help here. So have the relationship and have resources available, and actually, I think it's not an and or, I think it's and, like, both. Have what Phoenicia's saying, have the knowledge yourself to be able to have that conversation and support them when they need it.
I wanna move from the pre-service teachers to people who are further along in their career. I work with lots of schools, and there are shortages, people leaving after 5, 10, 15 years in, right? Retiring early, whatever they can. I'm just curious, how can we, and I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to hop in, how can we both draw people back to the profession, like, or draw new people in, and how can we help retain the people that are already there and help them, avoid some of that burnout and anxiety and things that all of you were talking about? And I want to dream big here, like outside the box, like you have some unlimited resources or magic powers. Like, really, what can we really do? What are your dream big ideas for this? I see Phoenicia, you want to jump in?
People, I saw some not too long ago. People, they don't leave jobs, they leave leaders. So if you want to retain your teachers, if you want to get teachers coming back in, you have to check yourself as a leader. I say that from experience because, again, my first 5 years in education, if Dr. Berkey Hernandez Owalabi was still my principal, I would likely still be in the classroom. I would follow that woman wherever she went. And it was simply because of the support that her and my instructional coach, Tania Smith, gave. Like those two people, it was unparalleled. Um, so much so, I feel like and it wasn't even about the math or the education. It was just them treating me as a human. So much so where, and I'll tell a story. I remember one time coming to work, and I live South Houston. My school was way north, and it's about an hour drive, and some of the roads have frozen over. And my assistant principal called, and she was like, "Hey, Hawkins, you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna be a little bit late." This woman, Wilhelmina Hicks, was a principal. She was in education for, I think, 46 years. When I got to work, she was in my class watching my kids. And I didn't necessarily get in trouble for being late, but it was that kind of thing that they did. Everything didn't have to be a write-up. It was simply just seeing me as Phoenicia and being able to support. And I think that's what we're missing in education. I think everybody wants to get to leadership, but once you get there, you come with the gavel, and that's the quickest way to get people to leave. Um, Sir Richard Branson has this quote that I love: train people well enough to leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. And I think that's a huge part of what we're missing. We are just so focused on the scores, so focused on your lesson plans being turned in, so focused on your internalization that you lose sight of the human that you're trying to train up. And so people don't leave jobs, they leave leaders. So if we want to get, our teachers back, and if we want to keep the teachers that we have in our building, I think leaders, not only at the campus level, but district level, have to evaluate themselves and find out, what are we doing and who is the problem? Because as I said, I would likely still be 17 years in teaching seventh grade math at Clark Middle School if those two people were still my leaders, because I'd follow her to the end of the world just because of how she treated me and the kindness that she gave me all throughout the years I was working for her. So leaders need to really evaluate themselves. If we need to talk about all the other things, yes, but to keep teachers in that building and make me want to come back and not look for a job over the summer, what did you do as a leader to pour into me?
Yeah, so just kind of building off what Phoenicia said, I think education is this a weird spot where in the business world, like people fall in, or maybe like work towards leadership roles where in education it's like, hey, we're going to make you a principal and we hope you do a good job at that. At that, and then I think we have to recognize we have building leaders and we have instructional leaders, and rarely do we have both. And so, are we assigning building tasks to instructional leaders and vice versa? There's lots of building tasks that need to get done, and that job is not for me. But if you said I could be an instructional leader and that was my job, I'd be all over it. But I don't want any part of like organizing dances. It's just not my jam. I don't like doing that. And so if we can call that out and say, look, hey, you're great at doing this and you're great at doing that, and let's build them up in both categories, but let's not assume because you're a principal or a super whatever that you're the best person to be doing my evaluation as an instructor.
So I'm the really annoying person who's like, it's not one answer. So I think there are people who leave teaching for a lot of different reasons. And there is a huge pocket of people who leave because of the leader. My husband's in administration. And it was just so interesting to hear the conversation around COVID, where it was like, schools are like this, schools are like that. Meanwhile, at his school, it's like, oh, but it wasn't like that. So like leadership is a huge part. And also, there are a group of educators who leave because they just aren't enjoying their job. It feels like their students don't love it. They've got behaviors that they're struggling with, and leadership plays a part in that, right? Like how is a leader supporting behaviors in the classroom, developing the teacher, and all of that. And so I think the two things that I kind of want to touch on are one, the teacher who is like, I'm not finding that fulfillment. And for me, my area of expertise and where I focus so much time in is like, how do we get the teacher excited about what they're teaching? It changes students' interaction with the content. It changes their behavior, their excitement, their growth, and that kind of like pours back into teacher fulfillment. So I think there's that pocket too. And we've had that. We've had teachers who have been like, I was ready to leave teaching, and then I did your book study on building thinking classrooms, changed it, and I'm like in love with teaching. That is a story we've heard over and over. So there's that group of teachers too. And I also think there's a group of teachers who are thriving in the classroom and want to have career development and don't feel like they have anywhere to go other than, and being an assistant principal or a principal. And it's like, where are we creating positions for those teachers who want to grow but still love teaching? What are we doing for them to give them that career growth opportunity still within like the lane of getting to teach students? And so I don't have an answer for that, but that's just something that I've seen.
So we've talked about like pre-service teachers and those teachers that are the first couple years. We've talked about teachers that are like on the verge of burnout or maybe not even on the verge, that they're far past burnout, but they're still being present each day because of the kids. Well, what about the teachers that are either they're happy with what's going on, or the ones that are just like they're content or surviving? So when we get into like district PD, what does district PD look like for all of our math teachers? And like, how should it look? I should say, how should it look? Because I think about as a middle school math teacher, like I was forced into uh, a 3-day series, and then they called it grammar boot camp. And for math, I was a math teacher. I didn't understand it. And if you guys know me, I'm rather vocal, so let's just say I wasn't silent. Um, but like Jody and Vanessa, like I'm curious, like teachers that are there, maybe Vanessa from like they don't realize that they need to do more with like math anxiety in their classrooms because they've taught for maybe 15, 20, 30 years. And then Jody, like thinking from like a content lens or like a pedagogical lens, what's missing with district PD, these mandated days that we're doing things. When I know Dan like, and I have talked about this, there's certain things where it's a necessity, like some of like the nuts and bolts, like we just have to do it because we have to do it. But when we get into like, hey, let's bring all the math teachers in, what does that look like So Jody and Vanessa, I'm gonna let you guys go, and then I'll bring it to the other three.
So Rob, as you were talking, I was thinking my district does have some of those days, and you're right that sometimes there are things you just have to do because you have to do them. We had a professional development day last week, actually, on election day. Teachers came to school, students didn't. And I really appreciate that the first half of the day, so we had 3 hours that we could go to sessions that were your choice. It was like a little mini conference. And it was led by teachers and leaders in our district. And then you had the afternoon completely for your choice to do what you needed, whether it was meeting with your department or your grade level, working on your own, collaborating with support staff. So I think that choice is really important. But before COVID hit, I was really fortunate. I had a friend who was a math ed professor at Ohio State, and she had done some problem solving workshops in the summers, and we kept having teachers join. And I had surveyed them because I thought maybe they were coming to get like their master's plus 15 or like what was drawing people. And I was really surprised in the survey results. They were like, I just like learning about this. So we had expanded it. There was a team of grad students and professors coming in and teaching problem solving workshops in our classrooms with after school sessions that, again, teachers were coming, they weren't getting paid, they were completely voluntary, they just loved learning. So it's really unfortunate that COVID happened and we kind of lost the momentum with that. And we just haven't been able to get it going again. But I think there is a thirst for some of that joy in the classroom and focusing on rich tasks and problems and opening that up beyond just calculation. And Vanessa, I think through some of that and seeing different strategies, teachers were beginning to deal with some of that anxiety without us addressing it explicitly. So let you lead in with the rest of that.
I love that you just led me in like that. That was actually very generous of you. Thank you. Um, I love what you said there because I think there's like two parts. I'm just gonna like say something quick about what you said because I think one of the ways teachers get to work through their anxiety is through engaging in a new behavior, right? So like math is really, really scary, and then they do it, at this PD, and it feels so nice, and they experience joy, and they're like, I've never seen math like this, and oh my God, I feel so much more capable, and like that is a way for them to have an experience that leads to a new belief, right? Instead of, you know, being fed the belief of like, I often lead with belief. Like I want to tell people, I want to help them unpack their math trauma. I want to help, tell them it's normal, explain what's actually happening to them when that happens so they can be like, oh my God, this isn't just some crazy feeling. And I think those two really go hand in hand. And I kind of stand by like, I think it's really important for them to have these mathematical experiences and to then have the opportunity to unpack why it felt different. Why now they feel joy and they didn't before? What is it that led to them feeling confidence? Why were their past experiences different? Because I think sometimes that pointing out is what helps us change our behavior when we're teaching, right? Like it's not only always so obvious. Like we can have this amazing PD and be like, "Oh, so awesome. I love how this teacher taught this," and da da da, and not be paying attention to something like, did you realize that the facilitator of that PD was really careful with their language? They crouched down when they were talking to you instead of looming over top of you. Like they put you in groups and made sure everyone was included. Sometimes we as a facilitator think that's really obvious, but it's not. Sometimes the teacher just has this great experience and they don't think, what were those things that happened? Those micro teacher moves. Yeah, like Daniel, you're saying, yeah. What were those teacher moves that made me feel that way, that made me experience that joy? And it's so essential that we capture that. Otherwise, it's a great day of PD and we had fun and we feel great. And then we go back into the classroom and maybe we do a couple of those things, but just a couple because we don't realize there was like 15 things that happen, these little things. So I think that's what I'll kind of just wrap up by saying is I think we really do have to be so intentional with how we unpack these beautiful experiences for teachers. The last thing I wanted to say that I was going to say before, Jody, you led me and segued me in so nicely is, I hear a lot of people say, not a lot can happen in one day. You're in 1 hour, right? Like we need this consistent PD and we need, and yes, like 100%. But I do want to say a lot can happen in an hour. A lot can happen in an hour. And there is something to be said for simply inspiring teachers in an hour, inspiring them to be like, you know what? That made me feel some type of way. And the fact that I got a taste that I can feel that way and that I can make my students feel that way is reinvigorating me, re-motivating me, reminding me of why I'm in this profession and I want to learn more. And so I think a lot can happen in an hour. Don't discount that. Don't be like, oh, if it's just an hour, forget it. It's like sometimes that's really what you need. And even better if once those inspired teachers have, like all of you have been saying, have somewhere to go after that, have a resource to seek, have a culture that supports their new learning. And yeah, but don't discount that hour and don't discount the necessity to unpack the emotional piece of whatever mathematical content experience you gave those teachers. Daniel, I can see
Yeah.
you drooling.
Yeah,
Wait, I'm
and
not
then
facilitating. I'm not facilitating this podcast. Are we allowed to talk next?
no,
Okay.
I was going to say Dan, and then I have my final question is going to be to
Okay.
Phoenicia, and then Chris will wrap us up. But go ahead,
All
Dan.
right. So kind of going off what Vanessa said, our beliefs are based off of our experiences. And for PD, do less. Do less, not less PD, but try like your building goal. If you don't have a building goal, get one and make it very specific. If it's increased student engagement, that's too broad. And I'll go with this. So someone take this, write a pamphlet about it. Focus on, like, let's say the first 10 minutes of class. How are we inviting students into this space? Okay, so you have PD on that very specific topic. You talk about teacher moves, you talk about what are you actually doing? Like, is this review problems that kids are expected to be able to do, or are they coming in there saying, oh, great, now you just showed me all the problems I already don't know how to do, so I'm not a big fan of bell ringers for that reason. But also, if we just focus on something like the first 10 minutes of class, picture what this conversation looks like with the principal. Hey, I'm going to stop in your classroom for 10 minutes and then I'm going to leave. Principal gets a whole bunch of time back. You get to breathe a sigh of relief, and you get quality feedback on just 10 minutes. And I guarantee you, if a teacher's crushing it for the first 10 minutes of class, the rest of the class will probably go pretty smooth. And so I feel like we're trying to just hit all of these different markers instead of just saying, hyper focus on one thing and commit to it. Because and then also, by the way, next year when you have a whole bunch of new teachers, you have to teach them too. You have to train them as well on those things, because if you weren't there, then you just missed all of that. So I would say do less and hyper focus on smaller things. Vanessa was saying, like, how do you bridge conversation so it's student to student talking? That is a skill that has to be practiced. You can't watch a video and say, oh yeah, yeah, do that. Hey, tell me more about that. Um, it is a skill, and you have to see people do. You have to be intentional about it. And it kind of goes back to what I said before. I want to focus on the moves that I'm making, not what am I teaching.
Yeah, and then my final question to Phoenicia, because I know with your background and what you're currently working and how you're currently working, and what you said earlier. What you said earlier was like something about um, you know understanding the math that you were teaching, right? And then you helping a teacher and with job embedded coaching, because I think that's an important piece of this as well.
Mhm.
And sometimes you're hopping in and co-teaching and facilitating. Like, where does like job embedded coaching come into play? And also, where does like content coaching come into play? Because I mean, we talked earlier about coming out of pre-service, they may not actually understand how to teach that content. They may understand the content, but not how to teach that
Mhm.
content. So how does that look within this whole thing?
Whoever your instructional coach is, I think that's going to be a large responsibility for them. I posted something not too long ago. I mean, we used Carnegie and Bluebonnet here in Texas for the last 4 or 5 years, and so I posted the same lesson. I start my summer off. So Daniel, while you're in the summer thinking, I'm in the summer doing all the lessons all over again, because I'm looking at my progression as a math leader. I want to see how did I do this last year, and how did my thinking change? How did my thinking progress? And so I feel like with the content coaching, as I said before, you have to have a coach who has some sort of grasp. Let me take that back. Not some sort. They have to have the best grasp that they can on the math, which is exactly why when that teacher rotated that double number line. And it never occurred to me that the vertical number line is basically how we balance the two-step equations if we're doing the steps. But that's how she saw it. And if I was not open to that, if I was just stuck on, no, you have to do it this way, you cannot deviate, goes back to the whole fidelity thing, right? Then what are we really doing to grow our teachers? Sitting down, a lot of times in my role, I'll sit down with my teachers or even some of the APs that I coach, and we'll go over the actual lesson. And I like to, about a week before they teach anything, I like to just send out some notes like, hey, here's some things I'm seeing, think about this. And one of the teachers in sixth grade, she says, I always have your notes next to mine because they remind me of something that I may have forgotten or something that I didn't even know. But it took me, I mean, I'm going into year 17 in education. It didn't, like, some of this stuff I literally just learned last year, and I think that's the anxiety and the stigma that we have as math educators, that we have to know all the things. And if we don't know all the things, we are a failure in math. When I was at NCTM, I had the most brilliant conversation with the kid on the street who was trying to sell me a timeshare. And he was like, "Oh, you're here for the math conference." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Man, I hate math. I can't stand it." And I'm like, "Well, why?" He was like, "Because I was never good at it." And I said, "Well, you get a paycheck every week, every 2 weeks." Like, "Yeah." I said, "Your taxes, right?" "Yeah." So I was trying to explain to him that you knowing the math for how it applies to your life is enough. You don't have to know the pre-calc problem. If you give me an algebra 2 problem right now, I'm probably going to look at you like, why? Just no. 6th through 8th, I'm K through 8, I'm perfectly fine, even algebra 1. But if you want to give me algebra 2, then I'm going to have that anxiety of not being good enough and not being able to do the things because I'm the math educator. And so I just really strongly feel like, and that's what I try to bring as a leader. I do not want to be the leader with the clipboard. I do not want to be the leader telling you everything you're doing wrong. I'm going to be the one that's going to sit down with you and let's figure this out together. And if I don't know it, Howie does. We're going to go find Howie's video and we're going to watch a video. If I can't find it, Mash Up Math on YouTube is another thing that we can look at. Let's pull up Math Stream. Let's do some things and let's find it together. And I think the humility that I have when I approach math and when I'm approaching coaching, leaders need to develop, or they need to have, because to me, the title means nothing if you're not growing the leaders behind you, or if you're not growing the teachers that you're charged in coaching. So we have to know the math. We have to be solid in it. And if you know that this lesson is coming up, and one more thing, if you are the instructional coach, you should be doing the math more than your teachers are doing the math. If you're just waiting for them to submit their lesson plans and then you look over it, you're not prepared yourself. So if you're not prepared as their leader, how do you expect them to be prepared when they hit the classroom? Because now they're just going to do exactly the steps that you approved in their lesson plan. So you have to you have to do the math. And I tell my APs that all the time. I support a number of schools. We have to do the math too, and we have to be ready to anticipate, just like we want them to anticipate student misconceptions. We have to be able to anticipate what our teachers are going to come with and be able to support that too.
You know what? I lied. I have one more question because this is so beautiful and I'm so passionate about it. So, Brittany, I actually want to come to you because as Felicia was talking about this approach, I started to think about so you and Christy, because you guys work together and she works for you, but like you guys have debates about representations, and you're talking about these representations that turn into like very deep conversations mathematically. So, how can we fit like the conversation about representations and like teaching teachers how to use different representations and why those are so important? Like how can we help teachers there, like whether it's PD or job embedded professional like coaching, or like what does that look like and how does it fit? Because it kind of seems like we're building like a little model here. So I'm curious, like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, different situations depends on like where you're at, what supports your school has. I actually just shared on Instagram the two books, and now I forget the names of them, by Diane Sweeney and Leanne Harris, the student-centered coaching. And so going through that whole like co-planning, co-teaching. And so like I am actually doing that with two teachers. And so we're talking about like representations. When we sit down and we are co-planning and we are going through this lesson together, like we're talking about the teacher moves, but we're also talking about the content, and we're talking about, okay, what representations are going to support students? Like, yes, we have this curriculum and there's not a single math manipulative in it. Like, how do we choose these math manipulatives? then we're going in and we're co-teaching together and we're in the co-planning, we're building the content knowledge by having those discussions about representations. You cannot have a conversation about a representation and not attach it to like understanding the math, right? Like that's the whole reason we use these representations. So that co-planning time is so incredibly valuable. And if you are in a position where you are maybe at a school and you don't have, they call them MCLs here, multi-classroom leaders, or if you don't have a math coach, just like Phoenicia talked about, like those videos, we have schools who play our videos about a math concept where we're breaking it down, we're talking about the progression, we're talking about the representations, and they play it during PLCs, and then they actually take what they've learned and apply it to the lessons that they're teaching over the next week. So again, I think it totally depends on the resources you have access to, the setup of your school, and the support that you have access to, like both like in-house support with the coaches and also the support of all the amazing things that we have online. So I don't even know if that answered your question. I went off on a tangent.
Okay, we could talk forever, but I need to wrap things up here. So I have just one last question I want to go through as kind of like your closing statement here. But I want you to dream big. With your magic powers, magic wand, fairy dust, whatever it is, I want to know what you want schools to look like 10 years from now. What would you love to see for teachers and schools? What's the magic that you'd like to add to it?
All right. That is a big wish. I would just really love whatever stage you are in as a teacher or a student that you just remain curious. I am still deepening my content knowledge after 30 years in the classroom. I learn something new, maybe not every day, but definitely every week from how my students have interpreted or understood a representation and a problem. And one of my favorite phrases over the years has just been, that's interesting. I wonder if that will always work. And I genuinely don't know the answer to that sometimes, whether it will always work. Like they come up with a strategy and I'm like, did work. You got the right answer. So just remaining curious has led me to learn more and has also kept the world pretty open for my students. So I would think just that remaining curious is my big wish. How we get there is still to be determined.
I think that I'm just going to intuitively speak for the first word that just came into my mind when you said, what would you want for schools? And I would just want them to be fun, like fun and magical. Learning is the fucking coolest thing ever. It's magic. When you learn something, you suddenly know this thing you never knew before. There's literally nothing cooler in the world than that. So I would just like want that to be the vibe.
Thank you. And Phoenicia.
I'll go with joy in math. Whatever that looks like for us as educators, I want teachers to find their math joy each and every day. If that's celebrating a student who was striving the day before, if it's you learning something new, if it's, your principal coming in and not having the clipboard, just find some math joy every single day, because then the joy that you have about the math that you teach will trickle down into your kids and will create a um, new generation of math educators who have less anxiety about, how they feel the math that they're internalizing and what they have to maybe teach later on.
I would say less of weighing the pig in hopes, that it gets fatter or whatever. I asked a kid last year, what does math sound like? And they said, it's the sound of an insert, a very popular web-based training learning platform. And they thought the sound of math was me getting these answers correct on this math program. So I would love to see less focus on standardized testing and how much like it's a fun sucker. Like it sucks the fun out of learning when we are constantly benchmark testing and constantly saying, hey, we want to see you improve by this many points. So hopefully that can kind of work its way out.
Okay, and Brittany, bring us home.
I think this is going to be very like woo woo, but I think for me, like in 10 years, if I could like wave a magic wand, we would focus 100 times more on everybody's brilliance than like their deficits. Like both as teachers and as students, like that we look at every single child and we find their brilliance and we build on it. And I think about this with my 3-year-old, like all of the traits that are so hard right now to parent are the things that are going to make him a great leader one day. And I wish that we looked at every single child like that. And I also want that for teachers too, that we have all of these things. I can't remember who said it in this conversation that are telling teachers like, you're not good enough, you're not where you need to be, scores are this, scores are that. And like I hope that the focus shifts to like, own your power, own your brilliance. You have so much to offer. Let's build on that. Let's expand. Let's not ignore the areas that we have to grow. But let's just see the good in all of the things that everybody has to offer.
You all are warming my heart. Thank you all. And that concludes this wonderful debate. You've given us lots of great insights and good food for thought.
And now it's up to our listeners. Take a moment, ponder what was said, because there's a lot here. We encourage you to share with friends and colleagues, admin, share this podcast with them. And you know what, as Dr. Child says, be bold and create something different. And we challenge you to create something different that's better, that's going to be more sustainable to bring people back to education, but also keep them here when they're here and give them what they need. You can follow us on BlueSky at Debate Math Pod. Share your thoughts on this debate and where do you feel? If you build something, share it with us.
Again, huge thanks to all of our guests. I love that you all had so much in common and so much overlap in your thoughtful and deep discussion.
Thanks to all those who are listening. We hope you enjoyed and learned from this.
And so as we wrap up, Jody, where can listeners find you, learn more about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn under Jody Bailey.
And Vanessa, where can listeners find you?
You can find me on social media, specifically my favorite platform, Instagram, at The Math Guru, or you can check out my website, maththerapy.com, or my podcast, Math Therapy.
Venetia, where can listeners find more about you and read your new blog?
Thank you. Yes, so the blog, I'm very excited if y'all can't tell. Mathedefficacy.com is my blog. You can also find me on BlueSky, Hawks Math and Magic, as well as a very, very small LinkedIn, absolutely LinkedIn, and a little bit of representation still on X, but Hawks Math and Magic as well.
And Dan, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, you can find me at scmath.org or Dan at scmath.org.
And Brittany, where can listeners find you and more about your work?
Yeah, I am just mixing math in all of the places: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and that's my website. So just search Mix and Math and I will be there.
Wonderful. Thank you all.